Good morning, Matt.
Welcome to the DMZ, everyone. Our post State of the Union. I don't even know if it's worth talking about the State of the Union at this point, but here we are.
I mean, it was just another example of Obama dividing the country with his mean rhetoric and slapping the hand of the conciliatory Republicans who want nothing more than to find compromise and common ground with them. It was a giant disappointment. Don't you agree?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think the whole thing is almost always, you know, a charade essentially. But look, I do think there was that part where Obama had to say, I won two elections. Like he's constant. How many times has he said like I won, suck it? I don't know. I found that revealing, and it is who he is. But
Well, but
it's not a
let's remember the context here. This comes after Obama says, "I've no more campaigns to run," and Republicans respond with sarcastic clapping. It wasn't written in the speech that I had to say it. He was giving a tart rejoinder to the disrespect that he'd just been given on the floor, which to those of us who are more partial to the president, we found hilarious and one of the greatest moments of State of the Union history.
Well, I wonder. I mean, I actually wonder if that was a setup. That if he knew, if he anticipated that they would applaud there, and then he would come back with the, you know, witty remark. But look, there are things that you can say, and there are comebacks. But it did strike me like that is really his kind of go-to move. And I mean, I think he didn't he say that to John McCain and maybe Eric Cantor like immediately after, like, right after he won. Like,
I mean,
make
I
no
think
mistake.
there's some debate what the precise wording was, because that was in a closed door meeting. But I think something along those lines was said. It was, I mean, and look, I think the Republicans have difficulty accepting that Obama was elected with some degree of a mandate. That he didn't just luck into it, and and Obama does seem to have to constantly remind them, look, I have cards to play here, and you can't just try to steamroll me. And so I think that line would have been much more off key this week if Obama's poll numbers were still at 40 coming off of the midterms, where there was this sense that the people had sickened of Obama, really wanted the Republicans to dictate the agenda, and wanted Obama to get out of the way. But the fact is, Obama is on an upswing, and you can say, man, it's just the economy. Although, I mean, there were positive economic indicators before November that hadn't really caught on. Maybe you can say it's just the gas prices, but I don't think you can separate out that Obama's done a series of executive actions over the course of the last few weeks that, at bare minimum, haven't offended the public. It's a reminder that he has he has the ability to execute his own ideas so long as he has a degree of the public behind him. And if Republicans want to use that moment as to say, well, Obama is a big meanie, and therefore I'm not gonna move from our position. I think that's more dangerous for them than him. I mean, you can say Obama is uh, being too crass, but as he has pointed out, he's not up for re-election again. Republicans have something to prove. Obama doesn't really have anything to prove anymore. He has to worry about his legacy being maintained over time. But I think Republicans have to worry about being seen as incapable of accepting that there is a large chunk of the public that likes what he is doing, at least in certain areas. And if you, for example, fighting an immigration to the bitter end is probably not the wisest thing to do coming into this deadline for funding for Homeland Security at the end of February. Just to give one example.
Well, I think there's an interesting lesson to learn here, which I think cuts two ways. But it's essentially fake it till you make it, and if something bad happens to you, it seems like you're better off acting as if it didn't and just moving forward, right? So Obama, really was dealt, a serious blow with the midterms, and a humble person, an introspective person might have said, hey, this is a message, maybe I should adjust, maybe I should show a little, not contrition, but I don't know, humbleness. But he didn't do that. He went the exact opposite direction, never, never demonstrated, whether it's body language or his action or whatever, any hint of reflection or of course correction. And I think it actually worked. And I think there's like a positive and a negative lesson to learn from this. I mean, on one hand, when we stumble, it's you know, it's a lesson to sort of keep pushing on and don't let the bastards get you down. On the other hand, I do think there's a negative lesson to be taken from this. And by the way, I don't think it's just Obama. I mean, this is one example of a larger sort of trend I've seen. But the downside would be that we're not really taking time to deal with mistakes and missteps and letting those and actually learning those lessons from failure. Any thoughts on that, Bill?
Well, the question is, what is the failure to have learned from? There's nothing that he's done in the past 2 months. I mean, this is you can say that people were unhappy with his tenure over the course of 2014 for various reasons. You can overinterpret that and say people reject all of his policies. And Obama said that's a slipshod analysis. This doesn't mean people don't want me to act on immigration. This doesn't mean people want to cordon ourselves off from Cuba for in perpetuity. This doesn't mean people don't want me to move on climate change. There are other less concrete reasons why there's a general frustration out there that I'm taking the brunt of, and so I can still identify where I'm with the public, or at minimum I can lead the public towards where I would like them to be because we're not that far apart on it. And therefore, I'm gonna press on. If he took a position that was wildly out of step with the American people, that wouldn't work out in his favor most likely. But he hasn't really done that. Now let's take if I can seg a little bit to another issue. One thing that the Republicans wanted to do, early out of the hatch, was to pass a 20-week abortion ban in Congress. Some of these bills have passed at the state level. They are, in all likelihood, constitutionally dubious as far as the lack of exceptions for things like health considerations of the mother. But they seem to poll well, at least on the surface. You say, should abortion be banned at 20 weeks? People say yes. If you get into the particulars of it, those numbers become a little more shaky. But Republicans have sort of went in saying, people like 20-week abortion bans, let's just blow on ahead. And then once you're in a position of actual governance, you control both houses of Congress. It's not just a talking points bill anymore. The details matter. Once you get into the weeds of where should the exceptions be, a lot of things became real sticky, real fast. And sort of Republicans said, I'm not on board with this. This is going to blow up in my face if we go too far here. And Republicans had to pull back on the bill. So it to me, it illuminates, polls only tell you so much. You have to dig a little bit deeper into what polls mean before you get too far ahead of yourself. And it also is a reminder that, governing and politicking are two different things also. I think Obama, having been in charge for a longer period of time, has a pretty supple appreciation of that. Republicans are kind of regaining the ability to have this kind of legislative power, and they have a lot of legislators who are new to this, who don't have that level of sophistication. Now now they're starting to have to work through those problems.
Well, look, I mean, I'm quite often find myself cautioning Republicans against doing things that are quixotic and are purely, in some cases, purely symbolic moves that are destined to failure and actually are counterproductive in terms of advancing the cause they ostensibly believe in. But in this case, Bill, I think it was a real display of cowardice and also a politically unwise move to pull this bill. I mean, first of all, as you noted, this bill polls at like 60%, so it's incredibly popular. Um, you have a situation where this is identical language passed in 2013. Obviously, it didn't cost Republicans the House or anything in 2014. But on top of that, I mean, just in terms of what it says, I mean, 20 weeks, Bill. This is this is 5 months after conception, and if Republicans can't, support the right to life for a baby, or as you may say, a fetus, um, that is 5 months after conception, then I don't know what Republicans can support. And moreover, if they can't take any political risks 2 years before the next election, then I don't know when they can. Then I don't know when they can take any political risk. So I think that this was, there's this trope out there, and it's been around forever, really, at least for 25 years, that, and probably a lot longer than that, the Republican establishment is wimpy, weak, cowardly. They betray the base, whatever. And a lot of times I think that's overblown. In this case, I think you'd make a pretty good argument that that's exactly what this is. The last thing I would say is I think this is the fact that it happened on the day of the March for Life, the anniversary of Roe versus Wade, where, I don't know, thousands of pro-life activists come to Washington, D.C. to march, is symbolic, and it's a real slap in the face to them. And these are folks, Bill, that are not, these are not your libertarian Tea Party folks who want to, like, shut down the government. And a lot of the people who are offended by this are, what the sort of compassionate conservatives, in some cases religious intellectuals. So this isn't offending the normal, quote-unquote, base of Tea Party grassroots conservatives that the Republican Party pisses off all the time. Now they're branching off into offending an entire different, I'm not saying that there's not overlap, but there's not always overlap. They're broadening the constituency of people that that they used to be mad at, and that they want to piss off. And I mean, if you're me, you're thinking like, okay, what is the Republican Party? Okay, they hate immigrants. They will shut down the government. Oh yeah, and they can't even be trusted to defend the lives of the unborn. It's like, what is the Republican Party at this point? Like, is that the brand? I mean, what's the bumper sticker here? So, I don't know. I think it's a discouraging day, and that's all I have to say about that.
But now, are you mad at the Republican leadership for pulling the bill, or are you mad at the breakaway faction that told the leadership, "Look, we're going to vote no on this, and the bill's going to lose if you keep it like this"? I mean, do you think that the leadership should have held the vote anyway and have the bill go down?
Well, I think there are a couple of things. One, I mean, I guess Renee Elmers is being fingered as the primary culprit. She voted for this exact same language 2 years ago, and now, and frankly, I think I heard she flipped back after they pulled the bill. So I don't even know where she stands on this. So I think she probably deserves the lion's share of the blame. Whether or not you can blame the Republican leadership for pulling it, I think you can blame them for not averting this. This is a PR debacle, and yet another example of them, with just being embarrassed. And whether or not you can blame them for pulling it, I think you can blame them for not seeing this coming, for not dealing with it, for not averting this crisis before it turned into a public relations fiasco.
But I mean, it's lame for someone to vote for something 2 years ago and then flip on afterwards without a clear reason why her mind was changed. But it does say to me that, things are different when you run the whole show. People's attitudes start to shift. You start looking at the details a little bit more. It's not just a message bill anymore. The specifics of it now matter, now that it might have a chance to actually get to the president's desk or even become law if it overrided a veto.
Yeah, and I think the sticking point, I think the sticking point on this had to do with this bill has an exception for rape, but you had to have reported the rape. at some point in the 20 weeks, 5 months between conception and when the ban would kick in, um, presumably the left could demagogue that, but you know otherwise, without some without some like sort of legal language to define this, anybody could theoretically say I was raped. And so, I mean, just from a practical standpoint, I don't think that's too onerous. Yes, I think the left would and could attempt to demagogue that. But look, if you're not, again, I mean, I feel like I burned a lot of calories lecturing the right, which is a thankless job, of course, to try to be strategic and to pick your battles and to make sort of smart political calculations. And yet here I am now finding myself saying, but sometimes you have to be willing to fight. And sometimes fights are good. Sometimes good things come from fights. And sometimes you have to stand for something. You have to be for something. A party, a movement, an ideology who isn't willing to fight for anything is good for nothing. And so, to me, this is worth the fighting for. This is low-hanging fruit. This should be a no-brainer if you're a Republican. A ban after 20 weeks of pregnancy. But, you could have the abortion at 19 weeks and be fine. But at 20 weeks, after 5 months of pregnancy, then the ban would kick in. That, to me, doesn't seem like a radical thing to support. And I think the fact that these Republicans are running away from it is an act of cowardice and also political stupidity, because I don't think it's smart politics.
Well, I don't want to get into. I'm not going to debate the bill with you. That's not going to be fun for either of us.
But thank you.
But
we don't normally. This is breaking kind of a breaking thing where we don't normally get into these hot button debates anyway. But the only reason I sort of went there is frankly because it's a really timely story.
Right.
And who knows? By the time this airs, maybe there'll be new information that'll have come out, and some of this will be moot. I don't know.
And I do want to segue a bit to Republicans in 2016 and some of the shifting rhetoric we're seeing from some of the candidates. That sort of leads into that. I mean, there still is a sense amongst Republicans that we need to expand from our natural base to win in 2016, where the turf's not as favorable to us. We need to do better with Latinos. We need to do better with young voters. We need to do better with unmarried women. And perhaps a too crude abortion ban is not the way to make inroads, particularly with young voters and unmarried women. So I understand your point that there's some bedrock things that if it's going to upset your base so much, they're going to stay home. That's going to be politically unwise. But there's also a balancing act between what can you do to go beyond your base that won't make your base abandon you. Isn't there an argument that there are certain in any party there are certain issues that are sort of accepted across the board, and certain issues where the parties say we got to agree to disagree. Obviously, the Republican Party is not going to become a pro-choice party anytime soon, but on some elements of how you would ban certain abortions, can't there be some sort of agree to disagree element here if there's going to be any attempt to reach out to these younger demographics?
Well, you're reading my book, Bill. Again, you're reading the millionth draft of it now, and this, I talk a little bit about this. I completely. I think the Republicans have a demographic challenge, and I think that it's sort of college-educated urbanites need to not hate Republicans. Hispanics need to not hate Republicans. We need to get those single women to get married, and they won't hate Republicans. That was a controversial statement. I did that for fun. Sometimes I troll people too. Look, I think that let me just put aside the sort of policy, like what I believe is right and wrong side, because I've already hashed through that. I think that purely from a kind of Machiavellian political strategy standpoint, this is a really dumb move, because I think that the Republicans should, my vision of conservatism in a Republican Party would be a, a party of life and a party that celebrates and likes people. We would be pro-Hispanic, pro-unborn child. Compassionate conservatism has been ruined by, was ruined by George W. Bush essentially. Um, but there are, I would say that I think it's true that married women are the most pro-life of any cohort. While unmarried women might be the most pro-choice, married women are the most pro-life. I think that's true. I think this is incredibly, running away from the pro-life issue is incredibly counterproductive. It's harmful. I think it's actually bad politics. It cuts against the direction that I would like to see the Republican Party and the conservative movement go. And I think it also muddies the brand. I mean, I wrote about this today. Grover Norquist has this great this great story about it's about branding. It's a lecture he gives about the importance of branding, and he basically says, like, if you ever found a rat head in a Coke bottle, it would destroy Coke's brand. You would never drink them again. You would never drink a Coca-Cola again. And he says that right now people think of the Republican Party as the party that's against taxes, and that's a very clear brand. But once they start, well, I'm for this tax, or these are good taxes, then that muddies the brand. And he says that, like, Republicans who vote for tax increases are rat heads in a Coke bottle. And I kind of think that the Republicans who are running away from the pro-life issue are the rat head in the Coke bottle here. That it's bad branding. Aside from policy, it's just it's not a smart move. So to sum up, while I agree with you that the Republican Party needs to take its demographic challenges seriously and needs to be able to appeal to folks who are college educated, urban, Hispanic, not just old white people who live in the country, I think this would be a very stupid and foolish way to go about attempting to solve that problem.
So if I can shift to how the Republican presidential field is shaping up, we've since we last talked, we had to skip last week because I had a strep throat, can barely speak. But we've had the Mitt Romney tease. We've had Mike Huckabee being more actively on the he's on his book tour now, talking openly about running for president. I think Rick Santorum took some swipes at Rand Paul and Ted Cruz, calling them bomb throwers who don't get things done, which is sort of an ironic comment. And we've had, and now a name's escaping me, but Rand Paul's staffing up. So you have a lot of activity going on, and you have with Jeb Bush, and Mitt Romney. You have them talking with different rhetoric in terms of economic inequality. You have Jeb Bush saying, we have to solve the income gap, which is the kind of thing that Republicans don't always say is an actual problem to be solved. They usually say, look, we're in a capitalist society, and there's poor, there's middle class, there's rich, and we need that economic mobility. Mitt Romney, who in 2012 said, I'm not worried about the very poor, they have a safety net, is now saying that poverty would be a tenant, how to fight poverty would be a tenant of any third campaign. And on the environmental side, you had these series of votes in the Senate yesterday, amendments to the Keystone Bill, where Democrats were trying to put Republicans on the spot to say they believe whether or not climate change is real. And one version of that amendment was saying that humans contribute to climate change, was voted, a yes vote came from Rand Paul, although a no vote came from Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz. I believe those are your three. And Lindsey Graham, also my former president, he voted for even one of the most liberal versions of that amendment. I think one of the only potential presidential contenders that did that. So you're now seeing a divide in the field over how to talk about climate change. What is and I have this whole abortion thing as well. What does this tell you about how Republicans are coming into 2016? They don't seem to be coming into it in a unified way. It seems, as I suggested, perhaps in my Politico piece from the fall, "Good news, Democrats are going to lose." That and as an aside, I've been named contributing editor of Politico magazine, so I'm
Yes.
happy to plug
Congrats,
that
man.
while I'm here.
That's huge news. Congrats.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I guess a spate of changes over there, but this is great. This is great news, man. You do great work over there, so I look forward
much
to
appreciated.
Yeah.
But my thought in that article was Republicans were not a unified party, and they're going to have to deal with all of their internal divisions on the big stage, both in Congress and at the presidential level. That does seem to be what's happening now. Would you agree?
Well, first, let me just say, I think all these people are running. I think it's 50-50 for Romney, but I think Jeb is in. Let me say, I think 50-50 for Romney, 50-50 for Rubio. But I think Jeb is definitely in. I think Huck is definitely in. I guess Christie's, maybe I'd go 80-20 that he runs. I think Rand is definitely in. I think Cruz is definitely in. I think that most of these people will end up running. So I think it's going to be a really big field. I don't think the climate change issue matters hardly at all right now. I mean, I think just broadly speaking, Republicans need to find a better way to talk about a lot of issues. But in terms of,
you think Rand's going to have to defend that vote at some point in the primary?
He might, but Rand voted. He voted to say that climate change is man-made and is a big problem. Is that essentially what it was?
Right. So you had 3 votes yesterday. There was one that said climate change is real, but didn't prescribe it to humans. That got a 98-1 vote. You had an amendment that said humans significantly contribute to climate change. That only got 5 Republicans to support it, one of whom was Lindsey Graham. Then you had a Republican amendment that had a bunch of pro-Keystone stuff in the amendment, but also said humans contribute to climate change, but took out the word significantly. That got 15 Republicans on board and almost actually cleared the 60-vote threshold when the sponsor of the amendment, Nebraska Senator John Hovid, flipped on his own amendment and sunk it because he was apparently told that if this actually passes, you might sink the whole Keystone bill. But nevertheless, you still got a majority of the Senate saying, yes, humans are causing climate change, even if they resisted the word significantly. And so Rand voted for that version without the word significantly. Lindsey Graham said significantly. Rand Paul said contributes, but not significantly. And everybody else said, okay, there's climate change, but who knows what's causing it?
Yeah, I don't think it'll end up being a big deal, honestly. I really don't. I mean, if you look at all the things that Rand has said or done or flip-flopped on or whatever, add this to the list. I don't see that being a big deal, but it's going to be a fascinating race to watch. It really is. I don't, I think it's just a jump ball too at this point. What do you think, Bill? I mean, if you had to bet today, who do you favor?
Oh, I don't really. I mean, I would lean towards Jeb, I guess. But I do agree. Jump ball. You have establishment divide. You have Tea Party divide. Who knows if some long shot like Mike Pence might come out of nowhere and surprise people.
He totally could. My colleague Jamie Weinstein just reported today that Pence is speaking at I think it's the Republican Jewish Coalition. I don't know, some meeting that's happening in Vegas in April. You've got Kasich potentially, Pence in the Revolution, Pence envy.
But
give Pence a chance. The headlines write themselves, Bill.
I mean, I would think that for
Hence
a,
envy.
I would think that Jeb has enough of a good head on his shoulders that he could survive the gauntlet and eventually corral all the establishment money to his side. And if the conservative wing remains splintered, that makes it, a typical primary dynamic where the establishment candidate wins. So that's where my gut says right now. But can someone like a Pence or a Scott Walker bridge the divide and take some establishment money and take some Tea Party support and survive that way? That's more. I mean, I don't lean that's going to happen because I don't have a lot of respect for those candidates. I don't think they're that good. Uh,
Well, Walker, I think Walker's running too, but I wonder about this. I mean, the compressed calendar, I think, favors someone like Jeb too. Like, okay, like I think it's possible that Scott Walker could have over time sort of navigated and maneuvered himself into the race, but this thing's all going to be decided very quickly. The primary, I mean, much
well, I mean
presumably.
that's
Well,
clearly the party's intention in front loading the calendar, but if things don't gel that quickly, if you have split decisions in your early states
yeah,
and nobody wins the Super Tuesday outright, you could still have an unsettled race that goes to the later months. Um, and
or to the convention potentially.
yeah, I don't want to be fantastical about it, but I do think that because you have these seeds of some big intra-party division. I mean the way Jeb is running, the rhetoric he's beginning to use is not going to be shared by other people. I mean, that's a pretty big divide we're talking about. We have to solve the income gap, or we need to simply make it easier for our businesses to throw off the shackles of regulation. I mean, Jeb is saying flat out that if we don't have a narrower divide between the wealthy, the poor, and the middle class, we have failed as a nation. I mean, that's a pretty big leap for Republicans to take, I feel. And I think that's going to get hashed out over the course of. More interesting to me is than trying to predict who's going to win, which I think is almost impossible to do. And as you and I have agreed, I'm very bad at that. I think we're headed into a into a process where Republicans are really going to be forced to deal with, okay, how do we define ourselves as a party in post-Obama America, in a demographically changing America, where people are very sensitive about the economic divides that remain after the crash. Can we keep the same talking points that we had before? Do we have to change?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the only way, because Republicans have been going through this identity crisis reordering for about a decade now, and we've had nominees. And those nominees have had some positions, and they were not, by virtue of being the nominee, they were not able to change. They were not able to get conservatives and Republicans to coalesce around them and to buy into their ideas. I mean, they were sort of nominally supported their campaign and voted for them, but they didn't change the debate or the discussion the way that, say, a George W. Bush did. I guess the only fix is for a Republican to win the presidency. And then once you win the presidency, you then, if Jeb Bush wins the presidency and decides we're going to be for immigration reform, we're going to be for whatever, there will be pushback. But if it works, if he wins and he gets some momentum and some success, then I guess he can pull the party along with him. I guess that's the only way it happens. Or if Ted Cruz or Rand Paul wins and has some success, then eventually they shift the party in their direction. But I don't see any other way for people to kind of come together. What do you think?
Um, I mean, my general attitude has been that Republicans have to lose 3 times before they really can come to grips with the changes that need to be
You've
made.
been saying that. I know,
Right. So I would think it's probably a little bit premature to come around to there. And I think the question is,
but they only had to lose 2 times after Clinton.
um,
Unless you count the popular vote.
well, I mean, I don't know if George Bush amounted to that big of a change. I mean, he had the compassionate conservative bit, uh, but I feel on the whole that wasn't like a real ideological recalibration, and so he didn't govern very much in that way. Um, and whereas does Jeb Bush, accelerate this process, taking advantage of a weakened Tea Party and a weak field overall, where maybe he can win the primaries with 35-40%, and put his stamp on the party. Now, the potential risk for those who want to see a more moderate Republican Party is if Jeb still loses, uh, does that make the conservatives say, "Aha, we did it. We made the same mistake again. We have to stop doing this. We need to have a Barry Goldwater type and get back to our Ronald Reagan type and get back to our roots." And that just forces Republicans to have more and more of these internal discussions and not have the debate be resolved internally. Um, that's and you look at the early polling today, came out from the Washington Post. I mean, Hillary is up 13 points over everybody, whether it's Jeb Bush or Rand Paul. Now, obviously, it's 2 years out. A lot of things can change, yada, yada, yada. But it does suggest that so long as people are happy with the economic trajectory and Hillary is comfortable running as an extension of Obama, which her rhetoric now has been in that vein, that puts her in a very good spot, no matter what Republicans do.
Dave Weigel made a smart point at Bloomberg about a week ago in response to something I wrote and something Eric Erickson wrote. I wrote about why is it that the base sucked it up and supported W, but they're not going to suck it up and support Jeb, and why is that? Because Jeb's for Common Core and immigration reform, but George W. Bush said, family values don't stop at the Rio Grande, and he was for No Child Left Behind. So what changed, And we'd had 2 terms of a Democratic president before 2000. We've had 2 terms of a Democratic president before 2016. Why aren't they willing to suck it up for Jeb? And there are a lot of reasons. I cited a lot. Eric Erickson presented a pretty interesting argument, but Weigel made the point that George W. Bush was actually polling way ahead of Al Gore. At this point in the 2000 cycle, George W. Bush looked like a winner. And Jeb nobody looks like a winner right now. And so I do wonder if, winning covers a multitude of sins. If Jeb were the only Republican polling ahead of Hillary, and let's say he was up by 5 points over her, I wonder if a lot of people might be more willing to sort of eat that broccoli, even though George H.W. Bush famously refused to eat broccoli, and back Jeb just because he looked like a winner.
Right, but if I was a Republican today, I wouldn't necessarily reject Jeb because he doesn't look like a winner. Because, as you said, nobody looks like a winner. Everybody is losing to Hillary with roughly similar numbers.
Right, but I'm saying they would suck if they would overlook Jeb's squishiness or whatever if he were the only Republican who were winning. This is the way that W looked like a winner at this point,
right?
In 2000.
But if I was a Republican, I would say, look, we may lose 2016 through no fault of our own. If Obama is ending on an up note and the economy is in decent shape, we're probably out of luck. So let's spend our time just trying to get our own act together, sift through our issues. Let's have a robust internal debate. Let's put it all on the table. Let's try to one up each other with ideas and not try to tear each other down with cheap shot attacks, because we're all on the same team here. And if we can have a productive and constructive internal debate, that will make our party look good, not the way our party looked during the 2012 debates, where we looked very angry and displeasing to a lot of the electorate. And so even if we lose, our reputation will be enhanced in the process, and we'll be better poised for the next run. And maybe we'll get some good ideas out of this deal that people might like, and maybe we can put on the floor in the Congress. And maybe Hillary would even sign it if she was president. So I wouldn't even look at it as, if I was a Republican activist, I wouldn't even look at it as, let's find the best person right now, because no person has an obvious strength or weakness necessarily. Let's try to push everybody towards getting the ideas game, so our party benefits at the end of the day.
To paraphrase Homer Simpson, what was his line? I'm the magic man from Happy Land in a gumdrop house on Lollipop Lane. No, that's not going to happen, Bill. And I don't even think
I'm trying to help.
I don't
Matt.
even think it should, though, because remember,
I'm trying to help.
You could have said the same thing, though, that Democrats should do that in '92, and George H.W. Bush's popularity was mile high at a certain point. And Mario Cuomo didn't run. All the sort of top tier candidates sat out, and Bill Clinton ends up winning. And by virtue of his winning, he changed the tone of the Democratic Party. And by virtue of what happened in '94 as well. So, you never know what's going to happen. The stakes are huge. And whether you're an apocalyptic Republican who believes the Republic couldn't survive another 4 years of Democrats, or whether you're just sort of, a student of history, we're not going to, you got to play to win. The stakes are so high. This only comes around every 4 years, and you never know what could happen. You could get lucky, and crazy things happen, and the Democrats could have taken the same advice in '92 and taken a pass because it looked like it was Bush's election to lose.
Well, and a bunch of guys did that. Gore did that, and Bill Bradley did that. Sam Nunn did that, and people thought the field was a pretty tepid field. And Cuomo, passed also. But it wasn't just like Clinton, outlasted a weak field. I mean, there was a lot of discussion about how the party should change in that debate. I mean, there was a lot of stuff with Clinton's personal scandals that were a lower brow element to the race. Although even Paul Tsongas, I think treaded very lightly on those things, and the debates on stage tend to be more about issues, and the party arguably was strengthened in that process. So I don't obviously we can't have the purest of the pure occur. It can't all be academic. But I do think people on the Republican side could put their heads in the space of, we have a lot of things to sort out, as a party. Let's do our best to use this process to help us sort those things out, because whether we win or lose at the end of the day is not really totally in our hands.
And on that note,
I do have to jump. I have a meetings to attend. A busy man, Matt.
Now that you're a big editor at Politico magazine, thank you for fitting us in today. We appreciate it.
I'll try not to forget you on my way to the top. It'll be difficult, but I'll think of the little people as much as I can.
Thank you. All
right. Till next week. I missed you last week. I'm sorry that I was incapacitated, but it's good to talk to you again.
Good talking to you, and good seeing all of you, and we'll see you back here next week in the DMZ. Ciao.
Take care.